each region with horizontal cuts, then set the depth of each cut according to the color of the picture. And that's all there is to it. This is a recipe that the whole family is gonna love because you're awesome. All right, the robot's built, the software is done. Now it's time to have some fun. Oh no. Never mind. So what happened is I had accidentally connected plus to minus and minus to plus, and that fried everything. The microcontroller, the ICs, it fried my laptop. That really set me back. But I have replaced everything. All right, it doesn't seem like anything happened. That's good. When it seems like something happened, that's when you know it's bad. Okay, now we can get into the meat. Wow, everything worked on the first try. Yeah, I wish. You've probably heard me talk about integration hell before. It's when you try to put all the pieces together for a robot like this and nothing works. Yeah, I was in integration hell for quite a while. And I guess it fits really nicely with the Halloween theme. So let's start with a quick and easy test.
Do anything fun this weekend? Oh wow, cool.
I should probably turn that off. Cutting out chunks is no problem and works really well. This is a caricature of our daughter. She has 3 teeth and smiles just like this. That's cool, but I made this to make pumpkins that I can't make with my own hands. Hey, what'd you carve on your pumpkin? Pumpkin? I don't know why I like that so much. It's not really very funny. Pretty cool, but I didn't cut deep enough, so it's harder to see than it should be. Trying to cut this pumpkin has exposed all of the software bugs. I've been trying to cut this for like 5 hours. I'm not gonna leave this basement until this pumpkin is cut. You're an idiot. I ended up sleeping in the basement so I could monitor it while I was cutting. I wish I was kidding. All that and it's still super hecked up. I don't know what the deal is. It should look like this. I wish I would have remembered the baby monitor before I slept in the basement. If we keep trying, we should succeed eventually, right? This one definitely has that just put me out of my misery aesthetic. Something is really wrong. Let's see how the white lithophane does. All the software seems good, but this is still crap. Okay, I finally found a huge problem. This is supposed to be tight. All right, I took everything apart, put it back together. It's now fixed. That fix did the trick, and I carved a few more pumpkins, including a good lithophane of my wife's face. She's gonna determine if these pumpkins are any good by rendering a verdict on a scale of 1 to 10. First up, portrait of our daughter.
10, no
10,
question.
okay. How about the pumpkin?
It's like a self-portrait.
A reflection on what it means to be a pumpkin.
3 to 4?
3? When's the last time you saw a pumpkin carved into a pumpkin?
That's true.
I call this the huge waste of time. The robot got loose. It didn't run away, but it got floppy.
7.
All right. This is my personal favorite.
I look pretty messed up.
You look mad.
In terms of aesthetic appeal, I'd give it a 3. If
You don't think very
that's
highly of
generous.
yourself.
Hopefully that's not really me.
Wait until I overlay the photo. Looks just like you. Only when you're glaring at me, but that's exactly how it feels to look down those little pupils. This one looks like that meme where they tried to restore that painting. The way I might describe this is it's just saying, kill me. You kind of look like the Girl Scout logo.
A 2.
Come on.
Maybe we're seeing different things. I'm seeing a profile.
I'm seeing an old shriveled head looking sideways saying, kill me. Alright, well.
It does look sadder now the more I'm looking at it.
Well, the funny thing is these are all derived from your face.
Well, we all know the winner.
The big takeaway is that just because something's hard, it doesn't mean that it's good. I really want to see that crazy pattern working, so let's try again. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot and keeps you in the loop when there's new videos posted. If you'd like to support these projects directly and get behind the scenes info, check out my Patreon. And the last way you can help is to check out any sponsors. Now we're talking. I'm really happy with this result, although I would like it to be a little cleaner. My guess is that this is a combination of using really cheap cutters and my machine not being stiff enough. I'll fix both next time. Disregard the robot in the frame. I'm going to tell you about today's sponsor, Audible. Before you say, oh, sponsor and get out of here, a couple reasons to stick around. One, I'm going to be trying to carve the promo code into this pumpkin. This is actually the first time I've ever tried to use this robot, and there's a good chance it's not going to work, so hopefully an interesting result. The other reason is Audible's awesome. I love it, and I think you're going to love it too. It's a vast collection of audiobooks and other spoken word things. The great thing about it is I can learn while I'm doing other things. It's kind of like getting extra hours in your day because you get to get more out of every hour. If I were writing a business book, one of my keys to success would be Audible. Sorry, it looked like my robot was about to kill itself. I really love learning about how people did something, especially something hard. There's this book I was reading recently about the effort to make the atomic bomb. It has the really original title of The Making of the Atomic Bomb. It's an absolutely epic book. It goes into the science, the physicists, the politics. It's so good. There's so many takeaways from reading a book like this. You can learn so much from the past. The only problem is it's a really intimidating book. It's like a 50-hour book, but because I can listen to it when I'm in the shop or just doing whatever things where my brain is idle, it's great. All right, here it goes. We had a slight technical difficulty. I was cutting too deep, so it was cutting something though. Let's try again. Signing up for Audible gets you access to a gigantic library of titles. They call it their Plus library, as well as a credit every month for any book. Can you see the problem? It cut it backwards. You should try Audible, it's amazing. You'll get more hours in your day, and you can get a free month by going to audible.com/stuffmadehere or texting I'm just kidding. You can text Stuff Made Here to 500-500. Let's go get this cleaned up and see how it looks. Did you know you can form steel using wood? It doesn't seem like it should work. Steel is stronger than wood, right? It's like rock, paper, scissors. Steel beats wood and wood beats rock. Although let's get real, paper beating rock is some physically unrealistic garbage. I'm getting a bit off topic here. I want to wear Crocs in my shop, though I'd really rather not be wagering my toes every time I do that. So I tried to buy steel-toed Crocs, but they don't exist. What? Come on, Crocs Incorporated. This is a huge business opportunity. In any case, their oversight is my opportunity. So I set out to make my own steel-toed Crocs, and not just a one-off. I want to make a setup that will let me mass produce them. And it mostly worked. So follow along as I show you how I pulled this off and why it's a surprisingly difficult problem. This was actually one of the harder projects that I've done lately. I was really shocked at the number of iterations that this took to get working. So before we can dive down into the nitty-gritty, there's a bit of housekeeping I need to take care of. A bunch of people keep asking me, what's the deal with your face? Hey man, you ugly or something? To be honest, there's a reason I haven't been showing my face, and it's that people tell me I look really young for my age. I'm just kidding. The real reason I haven't been showing my face is just that I've been wanting to focus on the projects. They are the star of the show, I'm just the host. But if it makes you feel better, I can show my face. Or not, just let me know, I don't care. So I can't ignore the white elephant in the room, which is this backboard. I'm getting tons and tons of questions about it. So first things first, I don't plan to mass produce this. I make hardware products for a living, and the last thing I want to do with my free time is develop and sell cheap plastic novelties, even if they are fun. If there's enough demand, maybe there's a way to get this out in the world, but I'm not planning on making it myself right now. So another big question I've been getting is if I plan to make a V2 of this hoop, and the answer is yes. I'm already working on it, I have parts coming in, and the mission statement for it is all shots go in. Whether it's a line drive, or a slow arcing shot, I want them all to go in. I'm pretty excited about this project. It's definitely going to be a lot more complicated than this hoop. This is really elegant as one piece. This is going to be a mess, I promise. But it is looking like it's going to be a tour de force of economical spot welded sheet metal construction, so I'm really excited about it. Third question, does this account for spin? No. So the other question I've been asked a million times is what is the technical drawing app I use? It's called Concepts, and if you do technical drawing for anything, you should have this. It is fantastic. It's an infinite canvas where you can just let your ideas flow. This is the only reason that I have an iPad. And I'm not affiliated with them in any way, just a happy customer. It's really good. Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm loving the comments. It's really awesome having all these experts in different fields chiming in and giving me tips. And I assume other people like reading them as well, but I have tool and die makers giving me advice on my stupid plastic forming tools. It is awesome. I'm trying to reply to as many as I can. It's getting hard, but please keep them coming. I love it. It's fantastic. Thank you. Now on with the show. So what I made is a tool that will let me take a piece of sheet metal and smash it into the shape of a steel toe cover for a crock. Look, I'm not a tooling expert by any means. If I say something stupid, you'll understand why. It took me 4 or 5 generations to get this tool mostly working. You're gonna laugh at my first attempt. In retrospect, it was stupid, but I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm gonna show all of it. I think that's where the interesting bits are anyway. If you're wondering why I'm making the tool out of wood instead of, say, steel or aluminum, the first reason is I want the challenge, and the second reason is price. Go online and look at the price of a 6x6 by 10 inch billet of aluminum. I mean, what, does it look like I'm made of money? Let's make sure we're all on the same page here. I have a crock, and I want to make a steel cover for the toe so that when a heavy thing falls on them, my toes don't get obliterated. And the way that I want to go about doing this is I want to take a piece of flat sheet metal and force it into the shape that I want. And the way that I plan to go about this is carving the shape that I want out of a block of wood, and then carving the inverse of that shape out of another block of wood, then putting a piece of sheet metal between them, and then smash this down super hard. And then hopefully the sheet metal will become that shape. The challenge here is that metal really likes the shape that it is, and if you try to force it into another shape, it's gonna fight you tooth and nail. So imagine I'm looking at a steel bar from the side, and I wanna bend it into a shape like this. So anyone who's bent a steel bar before knows that it doesn't just bend, you have to force it. The reason for this is that when you try to bend the steel, this side actually has to get squashed down, and this side has to get longer, and it does not want to do that. So you might be wondering, how can steel get squashed? Isn't it incompressible? And there's some caveats, but it generally is. If I take a little piece of steel like this, and I squish it down, it actually gets wider. The material does have to go somewhere. So if I bend this, it's actually getting fatter on this side and thinner on this side. Isn't that neat? These same things apply when you're trying to form metal in 3D, but it's much worse. For example, imagine I'm trying to take a sheet of steel and form a bowl shape into it. If I was looking at it from the side, it might look like this. If I just smash this shape into the piece of sheet metal, this, just like the bend, this material has to come from somewhere. Either the metal has to stretch and get thinner, which it really doesn't want to do, or it needs to pull these sides in. If the sheet metal is this size and then I try to stamp this sphere into it, material pretty much has to come from the sides. And if you think about it, if I'm trying to pull all of the sides in, I'm basically saying I want to take this piece of sheet metal and scale it down, kind of like this. So newsflash, sheet metal does not want to do this. It will fight to the death. It will squirm. It will thrash. Wait until you see what I went through trying to get this to happen. So imagine taking this piece of sheet metal and trying to force it down to be shorter. It just bends. Just think about how much harder it is to compress this down than it is for it to bend. If it bends and compresses when you're trying to do this, then you get all kinds of bends in your part, which ruins the part. So this was one of the key challenges for this project, was finding a way to smash effectively a sphere into a piece of sheet metal, shrinking the outside enough and getting few enough wrinkles and buckling in this that I don't ruin the part. Basically all the iteration that I did was around this idea.
So I want to make a tool that will let me super smash sheet metal in the shape of a crock, but to do that I need to know the shape of the crock. How do I measure it? Do I use calipers? Those don't really work. Ideally I'd use some kind of 3D scanner or CMM, but I don't have access to one right now. And so I'm going to use my Tormach as a poor man's CMM. This actually works pretty well, especially if you have a probe, and I don't see people doing this very frequently, so you should try it out. Unfortunately the crock is too soft for my probe, so I'm just eyeballing it.
So the astute among us are probably already thinking ahead and recognizing the fact that if I'm using some kind of probe to measure the surface of the tool, so when it touches the crock, say for example here, the center of it is here, but the surface is actually here. So if I do this a bunch of times and I get a bunch of points and then I reconstruct it, I'm going to get some of this probe tip, and it's going to be the wrong size. And this is actually not totally easy to deal with. I can't just shift the points by the radius of the probe tip. To be correct, this one needs to go down, this one needs to go down and over, this one needs to go totally right. The way I'm going to deal with this problem is in the CAD. Once I generate this surface, I'm just going to offset it. The way that it works is each point will be shifted along the direction perpendicular to the surface at that point, which is exactly what we want.
The result of this is a bunch of points. I load them into my CAD program and then I fit a surface to them. Once you have the surface, it's pretty straightforward. You can see I'm offsetting it here to account for the probe radius like I was talking about before. I'll leave it as an exercise to the viewer from how to go to the surface to the tool, but it's very specific to the tool that you want, but it's straightforward. It's just cubes and things.
It looks like everything fits. I went and cut out a blank for the press. The idea behind the shape is it's sort of roughly the shape of the steel toe if I drop something really heavy on the toe and it flatten it out. And the way that I hope that this works is that this tip here will hit first, which will put a little bend in it. So as it goes into the form, it'll pull this end down into the form. There's not a whole lot else to say, let's give it a try. It's not a very good look. A lot of the creasing was initiated in these back corners where the sheet metal was stabbed by these points. The reason I have this flat back here is so that the back of this form can press against the inner side of the core and just give me a good squeeze on the front. But I don't actually need it. What I'm gonna do is machine this off just to make it smooth. Let's try it. This is the problem. It's completely jamming the part. I've now succeeded in making 2 pretty ugly pieces of garbage. So one interesting thing about these is that they're unbelievably stiff compared to the raw sheet. And that's because they have this nice curvature to the top of the surface. This is how they make cars. They press form, for example, the door out of really thin sheet metal. If you saw the sheet metal that they make cars out of, you would say there's no way you can make a car out of this, but they do. Except for their parts look a lot nicer than mine. Speaking as a complete novice here, I believe what's happening is I'm just trying to force too much change into the material too quickly. The one interesting thing is that the wood tools can definitely take forming the steel. Like, it's not really damaging it. If I can just get the right shape for this, I think I can form this. It occurred to me that there was one more thing I hadn't tried, which is worth trying before I go through all the trouble of making more forms. The idea is to press this way. The advantage of this is that it's doing a whole lot less drawing of the material because it's only going down a few inches. So I'll just see if it works at all. And I just
Brought to you by a
quickly,
paid sponsorship
off
for
camera,
Fable Maker's
see
Deck
what's
of Many
out it.
Things.
The press ram
We're
will
playing
go
through
in-
Curse of Strahd with a wizard party. It's nerve-wracking for everyone. The DM, the 4 one-shot wonders. We've got an ex-cop dwarf who's our tank. Every fight ends like this. Well, you didn't have to make it a bug. Why is it a bug? We have an artificer. His inventions are helpful but gross. Anyway, we've come up with a strategy, mainly because every fight in Death House was fucking terrifying, and that's bonfire fishing. The assumption is that each time a door opens, we have bonfire ready, and if there's something on the other side, it gets lit the fuck up. Then we sort of hopscotch away, dividing the damage as well as we can, or Scooby-Doo away if we're all real fucked up. This can also dovetail nicely into what my buddy Brett calls poor man's fireball. Make sure you have control fire, you'll need it. It works pretty well if you're up against dumb enemies. Speaking of dumb enemies, you might be wondering why 4 of us dummies decided to be wizards, and that's Book Club. Wizards can copy down each other's spells. Step 1, everyone choose different spells. Step 2, buy an absolute shitload of ink and component pouches. Step 3, share spellbooks before every long rest. Step 4, deadlift. For additional savings when leveling up, choose spells from each other.
This hole. This will hold it nominally square, and then I will smash the metal down into here. This made a perfect slide. If this works, I'll make something actually proper. I still think what's happening, even this direction, it was less severe. Shoving it into this hole, there's no way to fold up the side edge and the front edge at the same time without getting a crease. Think about wrapping paper. You have to put the crease in the corner in order to fold around a corner. This is the sheet metal doing almost exactly the same thing. I've converted this little block of 4x4 into hopefully a serviceable tool. Who knew? Pressure treated 4x4s don't machine that well in a CNC machine with a roughing end mill. Probably no one knew because I'm the only guy trying to do that. The reason I'm using a roughing end mill is it's just all I have. The one other thing that I did is I took my press form mount and I chopped 45 degrees off of it so that it will go at a 45 degree angle into this as well. And so this stack up should avoid that whole sliding problem that I had because it's going straight in. All right, so all I gotta do is just get this mounted up and then we can give it a shot. So this is almost crock shaped. I'm still getting these creases in the corners, but it would almost fit over the crock, which is kind of cool. It seems like the material is bending up and then that's allowing it to crease. And so what I'm gonna try to do is clamp the material to the surface around it and then press in. And my hope is that will constrain it enough that it can't lift up and crease. It's definitely gonna introduce all kinds of weird new stresses into the material and it very likely may be a complete fail. So let me quickly build some kind of clampy thing. Let's try it again. So from looking at the tool, what it looks like happened is the metal still forced the tool apart and was able to bend. But this does look a whole lot nicer than the previous ones. You know what's just the absolute worst thing ever is doing things the right way.
It is just the worst. This is a totally from the ground up new set of tools that I think take all the lessons I learned with the other ones and do them more right. So I have the outer cavity here. This is what I'll be pressing the sheet metal into. There's a big smooth surface that it gets pulled down into, so there's no nooks or crannies for the sheet metal to fold into and get creased. And now it also has a lead out on this side, so the metal's getting pulled on all edges, and I think that'll help balance the forces and help prevent wrinkling. This tool is also strangely beautiful. I love the two-tone. So far, all the tools that I've made have been much more beautiful than functional. This is the new cavity tool. The reason it's on this cuboid thing is that I need to be very well located relative to the outer form. If it's not located well, it'll hit and then twist, and it won't be able to get all the way in. This was a big problem with those previous hack tools that I had because they were attached to the press frame, and that thing has an enormous amount of play, and there's just no way they're gonna go right in the way that they needed to. What I do is I have this outer frame. It's made of 2x4s, but it really doesn't matter. This will slide into, and it'll locate it as I press it down. This frame has holes for some precision pins. This sits on these pins, and it locates it accurately to where this form is. And then the one final detail is I take the blank and I clamp it with 4 bolts when I set this on here, so it gets pinched and can only go down into the hole. So I think that's enough talk. Let's find out if this was a giant waste of time or not. To the press. It's still generating enough force to bend this. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? The wood totally bent itself up into a little donut. I think if I could increase my clamping here, probably with a piece of steel, then clamp the heck out of that. That might be what I need. Wow. We almost have a steel toe. So this side is just about good. This side is good. This side is definitely a fail, but close. And this is the only really bad artifact. It's pretty amazing. You can see that this is not square at all. Wanted to get compressed down, but it just couldn't do it without buckling. I think this will work if I super clamp the material down with not wood. I think wood is gonna not be able to take it. So I just took some 3/16 plate that I had and cut out these clampy bits that will go between the upper clamp and the sheet metal. This will hopefully keep the metal from creasing upwards. And these parts turned out great. I think plasma cutters are really underrated. This is straight out of the plasma cutter. Look at that edge. This is about as much clamping as I'm going to be able to get without changing the design. So I hope that it's enough. Bit of distortion, but greatly improved. It looks like the wood just couldn't take it and buckled in. All right, we now have a piece of protective armor for the 4x4s. I'm gonna attach some extra clamping surface area so I can really get a bunch of clamps in there and super clamp this down. All that stuff I said about doing things the right way, yeah, it's out the window. This is actually fairly typical for prototyping, where you build a prototype, you learn stuff, and then you try to modify it to apply what you've learned to prove that it works. And then if this works, I'll probably make another one that does it more correctly, and it'll hopefully mostly work. There's no point in going and building a whole new one just to test what I learned, because if it doesn't work, then I wasted all that time. So that's why I'm building this in such a hacky way rather than building another revision. All right, it's the moment of truth. It's a lot better. Isn't this tool ridiculous looking? This is so stupid. No. The one little tiny crack between my two stiffeners, the steel shot up in between it. So there's ripples all throughout the outside, but within the formed area, the only real defects are from where it squeezed up into the space between the stiffener. We're definitely getting a whole lot better than we were. Let me see if I can find the original. One of these here's the original one. Yeah, I never claim to know what I'm doing. I just know what I'm trying to do. Oh, this is so tantalizingly close. Can I get it out of this tool without making another one? That is the question. I bet I could make it work if I just weld these two together so that there's no gap anymore. It's a wonderful thing when two become one, is it not? I think we just might be able to squeeze a good form out of this tool. Let's get this in the press. Oh, man. I now have a clamp on basically every location that I saw the metal bowing up before. Probably what's going to happen is the metal's going to find a new place to bow up. Probably 2 more are going to appear. But if we're very lucky, we'll get a pretty good form out of this. Oh, yeah. Perfect. Just kidding. I think it's almost what we want. Very cool. Wow, that's crazy. Look how symmetric this wrinkling is. It's like perfectly symmetric. Isn't that cool? And look, this side too. That is so cool. I'm gonna cut this out. The overall fit is pretty good, but the reason it looks so stupid is that as I redesigned the tool over and over again, I incrementally removed slices of the final form. The biggest chunk that came off actually was the radiuses for this final tool. I think I added almost a 1/2 inch radius to the tool, which took a 1/2 inch off this all the way around. So that's why it's so incompletely formed. So I have some ridiculously large wooden cubes. These are my new tool. This is the smallest of the cubes. And then this is the big boy. This is actually several 4x4, 2x4s glued together. And then they've been planed top and bottom so that they're nice and flat and they'll mate well with each other. The way that this is built is there's 2 levels, which are kind of the core guide. This big brick here is the core. It's a lot bigger than the previous core because I've re-digitized the croc and made it so that I'm actually getting the whole shoe. And instead of one of these lame kind of half steel toes, let's get these into the machine and get them machined and then hopefully give this thing a try. So, all the tools are done. I have the core guides. There's 2 of these. These are what guide the core down in the right spot when I'm pressing it, like this. And then, those are the most boring part. A lot of material to remove, really hard on the cutters. I've got the outer form. This is really cool looking. And I added these threaded rods in compression. This is so that I'm not relying only on the glue joints to hold it together, because this is the part of me pushing up on with the press, and I'm worried if I push in the center, it's gonna tend to snap it apart. I have this inset here, so I can take a piece of sheet metal that I just plasma cut and set it in like this. So this should protect the surface from denting. It's only 16 gauge. I have some 12 gauge and 14 gauge, but it's too heavy for me to get onto the plasma cutter by myself, and my wife is asleep, so 16 gauge is the size that I used. And I have a matching one which goes against one of these guide blocks above. The sheet metal that I'm forming will go in between. So the fact that the sides don't line up exactly just doesn't really matter. I wasn't actually even really trying to line those up. The thing that matters is that when you look inside of it, everything lines up. This is a result of how I machined it. Everything was machined with all the pins in the same operation relative to the same jig, so everything was using the same coordinate system and they all line up really well. So the core guides hold the core nice and straight and in the right spot, and it just slides in, down when I press it, and smashes the sheet metal in the right spot. You could say it fits like a glove really well. Just gotta modify the press, figure out the blank shape that I want, and then go for it. Maybe when I'm done with all this, I'll use the CNC to make some wooden croc clogs. They sound terrible to wear, but the novelty factor seems like it might be worth it. So everything's loaded up. If I'm gonna be doing this a lot, I'll bolt all these things in position so I don't have to manually align them. But notice that the pins are on the wrong side. Normally they're down below, but these are above because I'm pushing up with this bottle jack. The sheet metal is really firmly clamped by this bottle jack here. When this jack comes down and exerts a lot of force on the inside, it will actually reduce the clamping force between these 2 faces, because it's going to be pushing down on this bottom one against this jack, and as that compresses, this will uncompress and get less compression. I don't think that's a problem because the press doesn't develop significant force until the bottom of the stroke, when I no longer need clamping. Alright, the moment of truth. It still did curl up a little bit, mostly on that edge. Yes. So there's one wrinkle, but it is on the back side, which is what I'm cutting off, so that's fantastic. The rest of it, there's some very slight wrinkling on the front. The question now is, does it fit the croc? It looks like it will. Let me get this cut out and see if it fits. This is cool, very exciting. So I just sliced all the extra material off on the bandsaw, and I'd say that the quality is there, but the shape isn't quite right still. Mainly it looks like I really underestimated the spring back. I did actually try to correct that a bit in the tool. I gave it a 1.5 degree extra angle, but it looks like when you have a compound bend, and I think this makes sense, the spring back is more severe. If I want a mass producible part, say that I could sell, if there was interest, then I would need to redesign the tool one more time just to get this edge more straight. It looks like the spring back is like 10 degrees here, which is gigantic. You can see the really bad spring back here. It's not sitting flush on the edge of the shoe anywhere. It should be sitting flush. And because it's sprung out, it basically doesn't wrap around the edges the way that it should. This is definitely not ready for mass production, but the technique I think works though. This is pretty cool. I have another tool to make, but I'm pretty darn tired of making tools. I think I'll come back to this project, but let's call this tentative part 1 for now. You know, maybe if there's enough demand for steel-toed Crocs, maybe then I'll make them. I don't know if my demand is sufficient to go through the pain of making yet another tool, but I did learn a ton, and I am actually really happy with these results. I'll almost certainly be using this technique for future things where I need to make a bunch of sheet metal parts that are complicated. One cool thing that I would probably do if I was making this in mass production is I would use a 3D cut profile on the plasma cutter. So I would basically make a jig that holds the thing, and then I would cut out the shape on the plasma cutter and then finish the edges somehow. I think this is a good place to end it. You can use your cheapo Harbor Freight 20-ton press to press form legitimately nice parts using legitimately cheap wood tools. It does take some iteration to get the tool right, at least for something hard like this. I think if you had something that had less requirements in terms of fit, you might be able to do it in one shot. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks. I was asked if I wanted to give a live robotic haircut at one of the biggest live stream events of the year. I said, how about instead of using the original robot, we totally redesign it, rewrite the software, give it some new skills, and attempt the first haircut ever on a famous YouTube personality live. I mean, what could go wrong, right? This crazy contraption that I'm sitting in, this is the new robot. And redesigning it wasn't totally up to me. The old robot had some concerns, mostly related to the scissors. Another issue with the old robot is that it's now a pumpkin carver. It's a long story. I'm gonna just spoil it. This was a stupid plan. Live streams are insanely risky. We messed up a lot of perfectly good hair, and I ended up having to experiment on myself.
Oh my gosh.
But it's gonna take a bit of work for you to truly understand the depths of the stupidity. So let's start at the beginning. I'm super excited by the chance to redesign this. The last robot had a few problems, the biggest one being that you got a mullet, whether you wanted it or not. It would also leave a ridiculous amount of hair around your ears. This is a chance to fix those issues, but while we're at it, it's also a chance to take things to the next level. It is a robot, so how about cutting a pattern into the side of your hair? That'd be pretty cool. Aside from that, Pat, there's also me. It's been what? 5 months since I last had a haircut. We're definitely gonna put me in the robot and take care of this problem as well. I'm also going to see if I can find anyone else to stick in the robot, because the more the merrier, right? This is all that's left of the first robot, and it was a pretty immature design. When you take something immature and thrust it into the limelight, it's gonna come with baggage. And this robot was no exception. It was a robotic arm that could move anywhere on your head by rotating around it, moving up and down, and then rotating in a bunch of different ways so that it could point towards your head. On the end was a mechanism that could detect where the head is, grab your hair, and then cut it to whatever length you want. If you do this on every point of your head, theoretically you have the haircut that you want. The new robot has totally different parts, but it operates in a similar way to the old one. It just does it better and fixes a lot of issues. The old robot was fundamentally flawed. It couldn't cut below a certain height, and this resulted in an automatic mullet, which is pretty awesome, but it would be nice if it was optional. And the fix for this is easy. Flip the robot upside down. Now you can reach as low as you want. If you made the arm longer, it could easily be a back hair cutting robot. The old robot had these dangerous scissors.
The main risk was grabbing your ear and then giving it a little snip. I didn't want to become Holyfield at the hands of Muhammad Ali bot, so I added extra space around my ears to keep the scissors away. This leaves a ton of hair around your ears, which knocks a bunch of points off your IQ. The scissors are also limited in how short they can cut, and they're pretty slow. We're gonna swap out the scissors for high-powered trimmers. These can cut right over the ears, they can cut really short, and they're fast. Trimmers also make it easier to do a tool change, in this case to drop in a second trimmer that'll do the pattern cutting. This robot has one other issue that you might not expect. This tube was just the worst. It caused so many problems. It would kink, it would stall the motors. I actually wrote software to try to detect situations where the hose would get caught or get kinked, which is horrible. It's the last thing you want to be doing when you're cutting hair live. I've been staring at this hose for so long, and I cannot find a way to arrange it where it won't happen.
If the tube has a problem flexing, just don't have the tube.
So if a thing is causing me a problem, remove that thing and I won't have a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't you think I would have tried that? All right, the thing that was causing the problem has been removed, and I think the hose issue is a thing of the past.
This is a special pivot that you can vacuum through. Putting this on all the joints means that there's no hose to kink. Problem solved.
This new robot is super cool, but a new robot like this comes with serious risk of not working all the time, and a live stream, you get one chance. If it breaks, that's it. I'll fail in front of like, I don't know, 10 or 15 million people. And it's a lot harder than you might think to guarantee that something like this will work all the time. Almost every single part is essential. That means if even a single wire breaks, it won't be able to function properly. You can think of it as if each part of the robot forms a link in a chain. If one link goes, the entire chain fails. The more links there are in the chain, the more opportunities there are for something to break, and when you look at the mathematics of this chain, you'll see that I'm even more screwed than you probably think.
Imagine that each part of the robot has a 1 in 10 chance of failure whenever I do a haircut. It's like rolling a 10-sided die, and if I get a specific number, like a 1, then that part fails. The problem is the way that these probabilities combine. Remember, if a single part fails, the entire robot fails. It's like rolling 50 dice and trying to not roll a 1. Very hard to do. In fact, if I roll the dice 200 times, I should only expect it to happen once. Even if the parts have a 1 in 1,000 chance of failure, which would correspond to a die with 1,000 sides, I should still expect to roll a failure 1 out of 20 times. This cold, hard statistical reality is the most likely thing to screw me over. There's lots of parts that need to be really reliable. This is made even worse by something else I'm gonna get screwed by. Infant mortality.
You might think if I make a thing, the odds of it failing are something like this. It's reliable when it's first made, but as it starts to wear out, the odds of it failing go up. But in reality, the odds of failure often look like this. Things tend to fail a lot early in life. This is what's called infant mortality. The things that get past this tend to have pretty good reliability until they get old and die peacefully in their sleep. This curve is so common it has a name, which is a bathtub curve, for pretty obvious reasons. You're probably wondering what the deal is and why this happens. When you make something, there are a lot of ways to do it wrong. And when that happens, the thing that you made either doesn't work at all, or it fails really fast.
You can be sure I'm going to have plenty of assembly issues. This means I need to do lots of extra testing to get through all the infant mortality issues. If I don't, I'm virtually guaranteed to fail.
All right, I'm about to do tons of haircut robot testing. Meet me in the bathtub. That actually might not be the smartest thing to do.
Getting this done is really tight because I had 2 other videos that I was making, but I left several days before I fly out to do all the rigorous testing.
All right, I'm finally done with the lockpicking video. We're gonna publish it and see how it does out in the world by itself.
All right, this is the best part. After all that work, finally get to watch it and see what people think.
Tons of people want you to send it to the lockpicking lawyer.
I'm definitely gonna send it to the lockpicking lawyer, don't worry. Well, there's no time for relaxing. I gotta go test this robot. Do you know where my Mac is?
Isn't that dead?
All the code to do a haircut is on the computer that I fried cutting pumpkins. I actually have about 80 hours till I fly out. That's a long time. That's like 2 full work weeks of work. If anything, this is for the best because the code I had before was pretty terrible, and this is my chance to do it the right way. So much for testing, but I can't test anything without code.
So it really wasn't too bad. It took me about 30 hours. The general idea behind the software is very similar to the last haircutting robot. So there's a 3D head that I paint the length of hair I'd like to cut on. How long the hair is corresponds to how dark the color is. There's a second 3D model of the head that I paint the angle I'd like the cut to be done at. and then I take both those heads and compute the series of locations I should cut with. This is very similar to the way that the previous robot worked. If you want to understand better, you can check out the other video. There's a new piece of functionality, which is the ability to take a logo and project it onto the head, and then use that to compute a series of cuts to realize it. I'll get into the details of how that works later when I'm a little bit less tired and I have a little bit more time. Remember all that stuff I was saying about getting past infant mortality? It actually applies to code as well. So when the code is new,
Like 12.
there's going to be a lot of bugs. You have to work through them and test it before you get to the kind of reliable zone. And I still haven't tested the hardware. We got like 40 something hours until I fly out. It is crunch time.
Oh, hey, are you tired? Well, it's time for everyone's favorite thing, integration hell. This is when everything that can break, breaks. And first up, why in the world is the angle of this servo wrong? Everything looks fine, and I just don't have time, so I'm gonna do a firmware patch. It's just gonna correct for it, so it'll go to the right angle that I want. But I would really like to understand this one. It can really subtly break stuff and just screw me in the future. All right, now why does it cut the top of my head at the right height, but not the sides? I have been trying to solve this since like midnight. My brain isn't working very well, so I'm gonna go sleep for a couple hours, and hopefully I'll wake up with the solution, because we've got like 18 hours or something until I fly out. So I got some sleep, and I finally found the problem. I would really like to understand this one. It can really subtly break stuff and just screw me in the future. I at least called it, right? Such a waste of time. It's about 12 hours until I fly out, and I still haven't done a haircut. The stress is really starting to get to me, I'm not gonna lie. My plan has been to give myself a haircut before flying out, but at this point there's no time to fix it if I butcher it. No one wants to be seen in front of millions of people with terrible hair. Even if I dared, I don't think it's in the cards. This last issue is tough. These 3 switches are used to detect when the robot contacts your head. This is how it knows where your skull is, so it can cut to the right length. It turns out heads are a little bit pointier than you would think, and if you hit them at just the right angle, none of the switches will get triggered, and the robot will plow into your head. This keeps happening to me, and it's pretty annoying. I've been trying to come up with a software fix where I strategically rotate the head of the cutter to an angle that will guarantee that the switch will hit. I'm just too tired for this right now. I thought I had an awesome solution using metal rods to extend the limit switches, but the problem is nothing else worked. For some reason, it just wouldn't suck the hair up into the tube, so we're pretty much out of time. We're gonna do a really dirty hack. This switch is wired in with the switches that detect the head, so I can hold this, and if MatPat's head is about to get bonked by the robot, I can hit it, and the robot will stop and continue on. I got through a dry run haircut with a little bit of help from the override. I only had to hit it a couple times, but without it, we'd ruin the haircut. Time to pack it up and fly to LA. Talk about just squeaking through. The main reason I agreed to build this and fly out here is that it's for a really good cause. It's a charity live stream for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. They're doing really good work to advance cures and prevention for childhood cancer and other life-threatening diseases. My hope is attempting a robotic haircut on MatPat will generate some interest and raise some money. It's all for a really good cause, so if you have the means, please consider donating. It is the day. The robot was giving me a ton of problems last night. I rewired stuff, I fixed some serious software problems. I think it works now. We're going live. A month of hard work and lost sleep, coming to a point. Please, robot, don't fail on me now.
Keep your hands, feet, and head inside the ride at all time.
People have asked me if the robot really talks. Of course. My job in the moment was supposed to be an entertainer, but my secret job was to make sure the robot didn't crush Matt, and I almost failed.
Did they put product in your hair? It's really having a hard time sucking your hair into the tube. Oh no, is that bad? Oh yeah, your hair is like a brick. Give it a little tussle.
I thought the robot was struggling because the hair was too stiff from whatever product was in there, but I realized later that whatever was in there made the hair clog up the vacuum system. I really wish I would have foreseen that, but I never would have. It was still really fun, and a bunch of money was raised for a good cause, so I'm gonna call it a win. Everything but the haircut, that was a fail.
You don't want to go toward the mirror right now.
We saved attempting to cut the St. Jude logo into MatPat's hair for the very end. Cutting the logo takes a page out of old school TV technology. To produce an image, an old school TV scans out a point of light very fast down a series of lines. As it scans out the lines, it changes the brightness of the point of light according to the image that it's trying to display. And doing this with a haircut robot is very similar. We can scan out a series of rows with the trimmer, and instead of brightness, we can adjust the length of the hair. I'm going with black and white. Either there's hair or approximately no hair. I was really happy to be saving this for the end because the odds of it working were very low. The trimmer is too stiff. If it doesn't approach your head perfectly perpendicular, it won't sit flat against your head. When that happens, it just doesn't really cut very well. I was willing to settle for a faintly discernible outline. This would have been straightforward to fix, but there just wasn't enough time and I had to focus on the haircut. The show was running over time, so we started the trim but then cut it as a cliffhanger, which is perfect for me because it didn't seem to be working very well, and this is a way for me to get off scot-free. Although I guess I'm telling everyone that right now. I would have loved to have seen a totally sick fade and a logo cut on the live stream. That's the nature of doing it live. As they say, there's plenty of more hair in the sea, starting with mine. And my brother's. Don't worry, we're gonna get a logo cut. Although before I let the robot go to town on me, I want to fix a couple things. The first thing I want to fix is the don't kill Matt button. I just don't like it. I'm replacing the switches with a big plate trigger. The way it works is if anything pushes on the plate, it triggers these switches, and there's just no way to hit this without it going off. And the other problem to fix is the logo trimmer being too stiff. I came up with a full suspension mount that lets it move laterally and rotate. Even if your head has a pothole, this should be able to handle it. All right, it's time to do this for real. No hair gel, triple checked.
All right, do you want 18-year-old douche tuber? Whatever that means.
It doesn't matter. I'll go with 18-year-old. What?
Dog mode. He'll thank me when he makes it a poodle trimmer.
This machine is a lot less scary than the old one, although it helps that I brought a mirror this time so I could see what was going on. I'm not going to dwell on this one because it's pretty similar to my previous robot haircut. So overall, not the best haircut I've ever had, but it did cut around the ears a lot better than the last one. Have you ever seen like a redneck kid haircut? It's usually like a mohawk that goes into a giant bushy rat tail. It gave me one of those. I don't know what the deal is. On closer inspection, it just didn't cut there at all. It's a software bug, but it's a long story. It's a little short, but that's kind of my fault. The style is me painting on a 3D head, so I got what I painted, basically. It's great to see that it can cut hair, but what I really want to know is, can it cut a pattern into your head? My brother's coming over, so I'm going to try to convince him to let me put him in the machine. It just seems really important. Humanity deserves to know.
But why? Why do they deserve to know?
I don't think you're understanding me. It's for humanity.
Well, I love humans.
We're going to start by giving him a shorter haircut to cut someone's hair that isn't mine, and so we can better see the pattern that the robot attempts to cut into it. Not a bad haircut. I like the bangs.
Considering.
Yeah. Okay, slight technical error. I did the fade the opposite direction of his natural part, and it doesn't want to go that way, like at all. That's fine. The only thing anyone cares about is the pattern anyway. The goal is to cut this pattern into his hair. It's simple and will probably end up being a meta commentary on the haircut itself. On the scale of Mona Lisa to Just Kill Me, it's looking like we're leaning a little bit towards Just Kill Me, but stuff is happening. All right, let's see how it looks. Yeah, you can kind of tell. Oh. So remove some hair.
Yeah, I look like I have a disease.
Yeah.
I need a little bit more humanity.
The pattern carving leaves a small amount to be desired. How'd you rank your haircut?
The overall general haircut is honestly not bad, especially the fact it's done by a robot. Now, when it comes to the shaving of the head, I personally would give this a 1. The fact that it was done by a robot and I've moved my head somewhat, so
It's your fault.
However, the results deserve a 1.
I mean, it kind of looks like it. There's a horrible accident that combined the eyeball and the nose. We're gonna bring in the impartial judge, the wife. Okay, so from this side,
I'd say like an 8 or a 9.
how would you rate it now?
A 1 also. I see the inspiration, but it's...
Execution was flawed.
Yeah.
So when you go to a gallery and you look at a piece of art and you say, this thing is ugly. Then you read the story behind it and you say, wow, the story behind this art makes it valuable. It's art. Anyone who says anything otherwise, they just don't understand art. I'm still not satisfied with the results. I realized I still have one more head of hair I can try this out on. My hair. I'm pretty sure the problem my brother was having was that his head was moving around too much. So I made this kind of apparatus which will hold my head extremely still. The nose hole isn't for breathing. If it's pushing against my nose, then the angle of my head isn't very well defined, and I want this to be rock solid. This has got to be one of the dumbest things I've done, but it is so satisfying when it finally works. So I finally succeeded on my mission, and things have happened to my hair. The big question is, what do you think of it?
Oh my gosh.
Pretty nice, huh?
If you wanted a face on your head, it did that.
Sort of is your face right now. What would you rate this haircut?
It is creative, but looks dumb. I see why I married you.
Okay.
A 5.
I think she's just being nice.
Yeah, I'm being nice. So if you're so proud of it, why are you gonna wear that hat?
It's cold. I did this image because it was simple and easy to tell if it worked. With a few more tweaks to the mechanics and better software, I think it could do some pretty good images. I need to find something suitable for testing it that isn't my head. I tried carpet, teddy bears, fur fabric, and nothing would work. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have asked me to make my haircutting robot a real product, but it just isn't good enough. You saw what it did to my hair. I just don't really see it. The reviews are rolling in for cuts made here, and they're a little mixed. But before I get to those, I need to talk about this video's sponsor. Now, you can just skip to the end and check out the reviews if you want, but if you do want to help support these videos and making future things, checking out the sponsorships is a really good way to help out. Have you noticed that my videos have improved over time? A lot of that improvement has to do with continual learning, which is why I'm excited about this video's sponsor, Skillshare. I try to spend at least 30 minutes a day reading textbooks or watching online courses. Skillshare is geared towards creative topics, and they have thousands of courses across web development, graphic design, running a business, and they're constantly adding new courses. And unlike random videos from the web, it's curated and specifically designed for learning. Also, no ads. So here's an example. My video lighting game was terrible. Skillshare has a class called Film Lighting Made Simple by Dan Liu. In less than 25 minutes, I learned the foundational elements of film lighting. Did you know that collecting all the random lights in your house and pointing them at yourself is not a good film lighting technique? Well, I do now, and I also know what people are talking about when they say things like key light and negative fill. I've found that continual learning has a compounding effect similar to compounding interest. Skills build on top of skills, and you get huge gains over the years. It's a fantastic investment in yourself. It's also a really good way to invest in someone that you love and give them a gift that has actual long-term value. Skillshare is less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. That's less than the cost of pretty much any book. And the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. So check it out, build those skills. Future you will thank you, I guarantee it. All right, the moment of truth. What did people think about their cuts made here? If I'm reading this right, Pat would like us to try again. Well, Matt, I would be honored to ruin your hair. What a great review. It's so refreshing to see someone who's authentic and willing to share it with the world, you know? When they talk about firing your customers, these are the kind of people they're talking about. They're totally unreasonable and they'd love nothing more than to see you perish. Nice, another 5-star review. People love this place. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot, and it'll keep you in the loop when I release version 3 of this robot or whatever other semi-deranged thing I come up with. You can support these projects directly by joining my Patreon. You'll also get some behind-the-scenes info. And one other thing. I have a New Year's resolution. I build lots of stuff, but a lot of it isn't that useful. My goal for 2021 is to make a portion of my projects attempts to solve actual real-world problems. The reason I'm telling you this is that I want to make sure my list of potential problems is as complete as possible. So if you know of a problem that affects people that you think maybe I could come up with a proof of concept for, leave a comment. I'll be keeping track of all the things people say, and hopefully in 2021 we'll have some neat proof of concepts that maybe turn into something. Who knows? Thanks. So I look very silly in this machine, and the reason I'm in here
is that the longer I go without cutting my hair, the younger I look. If you base my age on the YouTube comments on my videos, I'm somewhere between a 14 and 16-year-old boy. And the other thing that people are saying is that I look like the reference model for the Lego minifig. I'm not really seeing the resemblance, but it's time to cut my hair. I would rather not have someone cut my hair who's touching 100 other people's heads all day long. So I built this robot, and it is a hair cutting robot. It's gonna cut my hair the hard way using scissors. No trimmers or any easy mode like that. And I think it works, so I don't know because I still have all my hair. I haven't tested it yet. And I'm a little bit worried because the initial trials with the dummy didn't go totally smoothly, but I think I've mostly worked out those software bugs. I did a quick dry run just a little bit before this, just to see if everything was working without cutting, and it had this other problem of ripping my hair out. Ah! Ow! I've fixed it now. The fingers clamp a lot less hard than they did before. I'm glad I tested that. And even if this thing gives me a terrible haircut, I still feel like I've won. How many people have a robot-made haircut? It's basically art. My prediction is that it's gonna give me somewhere between completely terrible and a $5 haircut. Well, I've put this off as long as I possibly can. So this is the first haircut that it's ever going to attempt. So let's do it.
So how about that weather?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's warm out.
Oh, wow, cool.
You can tell from my face that I wasn't sure if it was completely wrecking my hair or not. I honestly was not sure if this was going to work because it was a hard problem.
So the hard part, even with the robot, is handling the hair. The hair wants to go all over the place, and what you need to do is separate out a very local chunk of hair, and you don't want to have any other hair trapped in that chunk. And so that's what a lot of the combing and finger work that stylists are doing. It's to separate out the hairs. I knew in my heart that trying to build a robot that works like a stylist to separate out hair was a bad idea. I still tried to do it that way initially. Before I go way off the deep end into the details, I need to take care of just a little bit of housekeeping. So I'm 90% sure what I want to build next. I want to hit a baseball really far, like really far. It just sounds like good old-fashioned fun to me. I'm excited because I found the perfect thing to put some extra pep into my swing. This is a device which shoots nails into concrete using basically bullets. So that's cool. I'm super aware of the safety considerations here. I'm going to be doing this very carefully in a very safe way. So no need to tell me to be safe in the comments, but if you want to, you can. If that sounds as awesome to you as it does to me, you should subscribe to follow along and see how it goes. And then these videos are very time consuming and expensive to make. If you want to help support making more awesome things and more videos, you can check out the Patreon, and in exchange I'm giving more behind the scenes content. Probably the coolest thing is the Discord server. I'm having a whole lot of fun hanging out in there with people and getting advice on my projects. Alright, that's enough of that. Back to the fun stuff.
How about the sports team?
I mean, I don't think there really are any right now, right?
Oh, wow, cool.
The first concept that I was trying to do involved 2 combs and do a complicated series of motions to select just the hair that I want. I even designed the mechanism to do it, and it was pretty cool. The problem was I just couldn't find a way to do this reliably without some kind of camera to see what's going on. But ultimately, trying to figure out where the hair is with a camera is a nightmare of PhD proportions. I think to try this would be insane. I told you that's an insane design. It's way too hard. You need to pull out the essential things that it needs to do and then design a way to do them that's easier for a robot. The way to go here is a vacuum. It's gonna make life a lot easier. Yeah, so as he so rudely interjected, I did have some alternate ideas that, at least on paper, seemed a good bit easier. Since when is it rude to have good ideas? You know, I'm really looking forward to seeing you stick your big head into this robot. My head? No. You're the one with the bad ideas. Anyway, I came up with another way of grabbing hair that uses a vacuum that is a whole lot easier than what I was gonna do before. The vacuum sucks all the hair straight up, and then if I slide 2 fingers in, I get just the hair that I want and no hair from the sides.
The way the cutter head turned out to do this is pretty cool. It only takes 3 servos, so here's the fingers. The scissors are on a little stage driven by a servo, and then the scissors are actuated by another servo. So putting these things together, I can move the fingers, grab some hair, lift up, and then cut. Unfortunately, this wig hair it's like wire, so the scissors can't cut it. This is unfortunate because I wanted to test it on a wig, but it doesn't work, so I'm gonna have to be the first real haircut. This explains the sense of impending doom in the pit of my stomach.
Do anything fun this weekend?
It was really sad. My dog died.
Oh, wow, cool.
The other big challenge of this haircutting attachment is how do I move it to all the different locations on the head? And so what I did is rather than having a 3-axis system, I have an arm that can move in and out and up and down only. And so it can reach the face and it can reach the head. Then I rotate the entire head. So if I want to reach the side, I just rotate the head, now I'm touching the side. And so rotating the head is hard because I'd have to rotate my whole body. I do the equivalent thing, which is I rotate the entire robot around the head. I always need to be pointing at the head when I cut. So I'm cutting on the top, I need the scissors to be pointing this way. If I'm cutting on the side, I need to be pointing this way. And so I added a whole extra rotational mechanism to the robot gantry to allow this. One other problem that I ran into that really annoyed me because it just made things way more complicated is that depending on where you're cutting on the head, you want the scissors to be going different directions. So when I cut the bangs, I want to be cutting across the head. I don't want to be cutting vertically. If I cut vertically, I'm going to end up with a diagonal sawtooth bangs, which is going to make me look like a complete idiot. So I added a whole new axis to my robot that allows me to rotate the cutter head. This machine is made with a bunch of different techniques. The first is plasma cut and folded sheet metal. You can see the plasma cutter is drawing these marker lines, and that's so I can bend the parts very accurately so that they fit together later. Some of the plasma cut parts are spot welded together, and you can see I'm using a little access port so that I can reach the spot welds inside this thing. There was only one machine part, and that was because I was able to 3D print pretty much everything. This is great because they're complicated shapes which have been very difficult to make. Everything is built on top of this giant bearing, which is what my head goes through. And then there's a simple 2-axis gantry. I need to cut a hole in a sheet of plywood, which this CNC router I just got would be perfect for, but it's not set up, so I had to make a tool to do it. Using your tools to make new tools is one of life's great pleasures anyway, so it was fun. And then everything rides in this stand I built, which bolts to my workbench. So electrically, there's really not that much interesting. There's 4 big stepper drivers, which are responsible for controlling the different motors. There's a microcontroller, it's a Teensy, that's running the show. It's communicating with the computer for receiving commands and all that stuff. It is a giant mess, but there's nothing like a good facade to give the impression that everything is okay. All right, how you feeling?
I'm a mess. I am good, thanks. How are you?
Can't beat a facade.
When can I cut your wife's hair?
It's not gonna happen. Trust me, I tried. All right, what if I give you a haircut that is a superset of another haircut that you want? Then, if something goes wrong, we can cut your hair down to that other haircut.
What do you mean if something goes wrong?
I mean, I don't plan on anything going wrong. It's a prototype, and sometimes stuff happens.
I already liked my hair.
But come on, it's important. It's for humanity.
Humanity again?
Yeah, there's all these people stuck at home in quarantine, and they want to look good.
How does getting my haircut help?
It just does.
That doesn't make any sense.
Just put your head in the robot. It's that easy. You just put it in, and it'll cut it.
My analysis is that you've made yourself into the man who cried wolf. Even if you really mean well, you're not going to be able to convince.
Where did that come from?
Oh, wow, cool.
One of the big challenges of getting this robot to work is that it needs to know where my head is in order to cut the right length. If my head is here, it's going to cut a different length than if my head is here. Your head moves around a good bit, and I'd rather not have every little movement that my head does baked into my haircut. I spent way too much time trying to get this depth camera working. So this is an Intel RealSense depth camera, and what I was doing is doing facial recognition to find where my head is, and then combining it with the depth data to figure out where my head is in 3D space. But there is a really big problem with this, which this camera is completely blocked by this stand a lot of the time. Even when it's not directly in front of it, it really blocks it. And I could maybe deal with that, but it makes the software so much more complicated. I just didn't think it was worth it. What I ended up doing is I put a little switch on these fingers, and this allows me to move and sense when it hits my head. And then I can use that to measure a bunch of different points on my head and figure out roughly where it is. So say I get a little bit too comfortable in here and I kind of move over to the side, it knows because it has this probe.
Move back, move back, move back, move back, move
Okay.
back.
In my head, all right, we're back in business. How do you tell a robot what haircut you want? The way that I solved this problem is I took a 3D model of a head and I painted on it the haircut that I want. Basically, lighter is longer, darker is shorter. At first glance, this looks like I want to be a balding man, but it actually makes sense to the robot. The other thing I have to tell the robot is what angle to cut at, because I want it to cut my bangs horizontally and I want it to cut around my ears. So this isn't telling the robot that I want a giant unibrow. This is telling the robot, cut the bangs horizontally and then cut around my ear.
The robot will load this 3D model, and then knowing how big of an area the scissors cut, it'll compute a plan of the minimum number of locations it needs to cut at to make my hair the desired length. And then as it's doing that plan, it'll cut one and then go to the next one and the next one. At each location, it will check the unibrow model to see if it should cut at a specific angle, and if so, it'll do that. At least that's the plan in theory. I haven't done it yet. Hopefully it works, but we're doing it live. So here's the whole haircut from start to finish. Heads up, I look completely insane in this time lapse. I think it's a weird time lapse artifact, but also I was terrified of it ruining my hair, so it's probably also a bit of fear. Midway through, I realized there was a bug in my code that made it cut about 6 times as many locations on my head as it needed to. I thought it was taking a while. So it took about an hour, but it should only take more like 15 minutes. Every time the robot goes to cut a location, it probes to find where my head is at, and then the length that it cuts is relative to where it probed. This is the main reason it could maintain accurate hair lengths even though I was moving around. So you can see the vacuum sucking a bunch of extra hair into the tube, but the fingers that grab the hair have little guards on them that keep hair that they aren't grabbing from being cut. Making this robot hit the desired location on my head was pretty hard. Not only does it have a bunch of joints that are somewhat challenging to compute where the heck the scissors are going to go, my head is moving, and then the design of the robot doesn't allow it to approach my head from all possible angles. I have to find the best achievable angle that the robot can do. I have a suspicion my math isn't always correct, but thankfully my hair all turned out the right length. All right, the cut is done. What did the salon's first customer have to say? All right, 2 out of 10, not great. 0 personality, I can believe that. Top and sides are cut well, nice, nice, but it gave me a mullet. What? The robot cut the hairs that it could reach really well, but there's 2 problems. The first is it can't get close enough to my ears, so I have all this hair right by my ears that's really long. That should be pretty easy and fast to clean up. But the big problem is it gave me a robotically perfect mullet. So it just couldn't get quite low enough to cut the last maybe inch of the back of my hair. I had planned to have it rotate, which drops it by about an inch, maybe an inch and a half, but the scissors interfere with the stand and it just couldn't do it. So I said I thought it was gonna give me a $5 haircut. I think that was right. I think even for $5, they don't normally give you a mullet. Man, thank goodness I didn't prank my wife with this machine, because I had to just go give her a pair of scissors and ask her to fix my hair. I'm actually really happy it gave me the mullet. There's just something deeply satisfying about a robot giving me a perfect mullet. All she did was cut those off. She didn't touch the top at all. And overall, I'd say it's really not bad. I checked some of the lengths. They seem right on. And I'd pay $5 for this haircut. I don't get another shot at cutting my hair for a month or 2, but I think I might try to upgrade this to cut closer to the ears, to not generate perfect mullets, and then maybe also add a trimmer or something like that so that it can do the neckline for me. So hopefully you enjoyed this. It was a fun project. Thanks for watching. My dad has this $20 Harbor Freight Sawzall, and somehow he lost the blade guard for it. I've always wanted to try to press form sheet metal using 3D printed forms. I haven't really ever seen that done before, and it seems like a fun project. So I'm gonna see, based just on photos I can find of what the blade guard looks online, design one, cut the sheet metal, and then hopefully design some forms that'll let me make a functional end for it. So let's see if we can do it. This is the best picture of the blade guard I could find, and it looks like it's made of 2 parts riveted together. The blade guard is where all the hard features are. It has bends all the way around the perimeter, which isn't too bad, but they're right next to a hole, and that's something you really try to avoid in sheet metal because it's very difficult to get the bend made without distorting the hole. And then inside the hole, you probably can't see in this photo, it's formed with a radius all the way around the edge, and that you can't do with normal bending. That is some kind of punching or forming operation. And so I took some dimensions off the Sawzall, came up with this, and just for reference, this is a cross section of what the form feature looks like. And this is the part I'm most concerned about for pressing with 3D printed parts, because this is a lot higher pressures and forces than you would get for a simple bend, because you're actually compressing and stretching the steel a lot more. And so I'm worried that I'll either just shatter the die or smush it or something like that. Make some drawings and we'll go cut them out.
I'll be cutting the parts out using a CNC plasma cutter. I'll be cutting them out of 16-18 gauge steel. And if you haven't seen a plasma cutter before, it actually cuts conductive metals using electricity. And the way it works is it creates a jet of ionized gas. In the case of mine, it's air. And this allows electricity to flow from the nozzle to the workpiece, and the electricity basically forms an arc, which delivers an enormous amount of heat to a very small area, which just cuts through the metal. And they're super fast and super handy for work like this. I 3D printed this die or form, or I don't know exactly what you would call it, but it's basically the space below the sheet metal part that I want after it's been folded. And it has a registration feature on top so that I can take the sheet metal that I just plasma cut and it'll hold it in the right spot. And then when I bend it, it will wrap around this block and have the right bends in the right spots with the right angles. Now to bend it around this form, I need another form or die which goes on top of it, which has basically the space of the air or whatever above the part. And so that's this. So it has a cavity in it which has the shape of the space above the part. And then I'll put this in the press and shove it down really hard, and hopefully it'll bend this thing to the right shape. Now there's actually still a problem. If I just try to set this on top and press it, it's not going to be in the right spot. And so I made this extra little frame. So this is a pocket which I can put the lower form into, and it'll hold it in the right spot. I can put 2 precision rods in. This upper form has bushings that go around those rods, and this will locate it correctly in space. We'll take it over to the press and give it a smash and see how it does. Alright, looks like the form is mostly undamaged. It is in there tight. This is okay. There's actually damage or poor bending at the top. This is actually to be expected. Generally speaking, when you're making sheet metal parts, you do not want holes near bends because you have this problem that it distorts the part when you try to bend it. I think I can actually change the design of this to mitigate that by pressing this before I start folding it to lock it in place. This part was pretty difficult to get out of the upper die, and the reason for that is it's not actually square. The flanges are bent out a little bit. You might be able to see it if I put a square against it. And that basically wedged it into the mold when I was done. And the reason for this is it's a material property of the metal. The metal has some springiness to it before it will actually bend. And so I'm bending it to a 90, but then it pops out a little bit. If I want an actual 90, I have to bend it beyond 90, which I can't do just by coming straight down with a press because there's no clearance to get under it. So one of the neat things about 3D printed tooling is that it's a lot easier than with machine tooling to get some kind of action that can fold the flange under and then come back out, because I can print whatever geometry I want without having to do really more work other than a little bit of design. So here's a quick demo of the spring mech I was talking about. I have a vise, which is acting as half the form. I have some aluminum, which I'm forming, and then I have the top of the form, which is just a piece of aluminum bar. Just like the steel, it's wedged in. And you see
it springs out. I just can't get a 90-degree bend with anything that has elasticity. All right, top die V2. And this one's pretty similar to the previous one, and the main difference is it has these 2 big holes in the top, which allow some pretty stiff springs to pass through the die. And the way that this will work is I will epoxy this little plate that I cut on top, and then the springs will go into the holes, and then I have this other plate which I need to decide how I'm going to attach it. I'll probably just weld it maybe, although I'm a bit afraid of annealing the springs. I'll probably just glue it. It'll be on these springs, and so when this comes down to form the part, I first have to compress these springs, which should firmly clamp the part and prevent that top from bowing up. And giving me this very undesirable shape that I have. Very nice. Very, very nice. Nice clean bends. There's no doming or flatness on the top. Significantly improved. 3D printing tooling seems to work pretty well for making bends in sheet metal, but what I really want to do is make a formed feature. And so a lot of stamped parts, and if you looking at the photo for this part online, there's actually a formed lip around the inside of the part, and I want to try to form that. So I made another set of dies. This one actually has a opening where I will try to press the sheet metal into this hole, and it has a radius all the way around, and hopefully I can smash it in there and get a radius on the part. And I have a matching die which hopefully does the smashing. I don't have high hopes for this. I've seen dies before that do this, and when I've visited factories, and this doesn't seem quite right. It's definitely going to put some serious strain on the part. And so I'm going to actually start with a much thinner piece of galvanized steel. Excuse the really terrible cut quality. I haven't actually cut this before and don't have the settings dialed, but